photo of the narrator, taken in secret, slips under the bedroom door, who's watching from within the house's walls. Tally marks appear on the basement door, counting down to an unknown fate. What does the house want? Hello everyone tonight. We're diving into a story that'll make your skin crawl like the creak of an old floorboard in the dead of night. Picture this, a crumbling Victorian house on the edge of town, its windows like eyes that never blink, staring into the autumn dusk. I moved in, chasing a bargain, but you might not survive this. So before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're listening from. Now, turn off the lights, maybe switch on a fan for some soft white noise, and let's begin our journey tonight. The air was crisp with the scent of fallen leaves when I pulled up to the old house. The real estate agent, Linda, had been all smiles, gushing about the charm of its sagging gables and ivy-choked walls. A steal, she said, for a place with so much history. I should have known better. Cheap houses always come with strings. The first night I sprawled on a creaky mattress, the kind that groans like it's got opinions. Silence settled, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for you to notice it's watching. By the third night, the noises started. Not your typical old house groans, those I could handle. These were rhythmic like deliberate footsteps, pacing inside the walls. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, tap. I'd lie there, heart thumping, telling myself it was just pipes or rats. But it wasn't random. It had purpose, like someone was counting steps in a dance, only they knew. I'd stumble to the light switch, half expecting a figure in the corner, but it was always just me and the dust motes swirling in the lamplight. Then, things got weirder. My coffee mug left on the kitchen counter ended up on the dining table by morning. Books I'd stacked neatly on the coffee table were back on the shelf, always the top one, where my arms couldn't reach without a chair. I laughed it off at first. Maybe I was sleepwalking, right? But when my keys vanished from the bowl by the door and reappeared in the bathtub, I wasn't laughing anymore. I checked every lock, every window, but nothing was out of place. No signs of a break-in, just my stuff playing hide and seek. I started to feel it, that prickly sensation of being watched. You know the one, when you're alone, but your neck tingles like someone's staring. I'd spin around hard in my throat, but the rooms were always empty. Once, I swear, I saw a shadow flit across the hallway mirror, too quick to be mine. I told myself it was the house settling, but houses don't move your keys to the fridge, do they? Speaking of fridges, ever notice how they hum like they're plotting something? Mine's been whispering secrets since I moved in. I decided to play detective. Armed with a flashlight and a mug of coffee, strong enough to wake a coma patient, I scoured every room. The attic was a bust, nothing but cobwebs and a dead wasp nest. The main floor was all creaky floorboards and peeling wallpaper. But the basement, that's where things got interesting. Behind a stack of moldy boxes, I found a door. Small like it was built for a kid and not on any blueprint Linda had shown me. My gut screamed to leave it alone, but curiosity is a cruel boss. I pushed it open, the hinges squealing like they hadn't moved in decades. A narrow passage twisted into darkness, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and something sour like old sweat. My flashlight beam shook as I followed it, each step echoing in my chest. The passage opened into her tiny room, barely big enough for the cot chair and table inside. Cans of food, dusty books, and here's where my stomach dropped a stack of photos. They were of me. Me eating breakfast, me reading on the couch, me sleeping. Some were grainy, taken from outside windows. Others were so close I could see the freckles on my nose. Someone had been here watching for who knows how long. My knees buckled. I backed out, slamming the door shut, and called the cops. As I waited, heart hammering, I couldn't shake the thought whoever took those photos might still be here somewhere in the walls. Ever wonder if your house has secrets it's not telling you? Like maybe it's got a diary hidden under the floorboards. An old neighbor once told me, houses hold memories and some memories don't like being forgotten. I thought he was just being poetic, but now I wasn't so sure. There's a debate among historians about whether buildings can absorb the emotions of their occupants. Some call it psychometry, others call it nonsense. But standing there, clutching my phone, I felt the weight of this house's past pressing down on me. The cops arrived, flashlights bobbing like fireflies. They searched every inch, but the room was empty, the photos still there, staring up like accusations. The officer in charge, a guy with a mustache like a 70s cop show, said whoever it was probably bolted when I got too close. But as they left, the house felt no less alive, no less watchful. I sat up that night, lights on, wondering who or what had been my unseen tenant and why they'd chosen me. The cops left their taillights fading into the foggy night, but the houses didn't feel any less alive. I sat on the couch, clutching a baseball bat I found in the garage, every creak making me jump. The photos from that hidden room burned in my mind. Someone had been close enough to catch the way I tilt my head when I read. I didn't sleep. How could I, knowing my every move might be catalogued by some unseen tenant? Ever notice how silence can scream louder than a horror movie jump scare? This house was conducting its own symphony of quiet. By morning, I was a wreck, running on coffee and paranoia. I couldn't just sit there, so I went back to the basement. The tiny door mocked me, its rusted hinges, daring me to open it again. I did flashlight in one hand, bat in the other. The passage was just as suffocating, the air, thick with that sour lived-in smell. The room hadn't changed cot chair table photos. But this time, I noticed something new. A loose floorboard under the cot. Prying it up, I found a small metal box, dented and cold. Inside were more photos, some older yellowed, of people I didn't recognize, men in stiff collars, women in long dresses, all staring blankly. Mixed in were newspaper clippings, faded but legible, about missing persons from decades ago. My hands shook as I read. The clippings told of vanishings in this town, people who lived in or near this house stretching back to the 1920s. One article mentioned a man, Elias, who'd lived here alone, described as reclusive, possibly unstable. No follow-up, just a vague note about him disappearing after a fire. I felt a chill, like the house itself was exhaling secrets. Did you know old houses can trap smells for decades like perfume in a bottle? This one smelled like regret. I took the box upstairs, spreading its contents on the kitchen table. The photos of me were recent digital prints, not Polaroids, meaning whoever took them wasn't some ghost from the past. But the older photos, they had the same eerie quality, like the subjects didn't know they were being watched. I started to wonder if Elias, or someone like him, had been this house's shadow for generations. The thought made my skin prickle, but I couldn't stop digging. There's an old saying my grandma used to whisper: curiosity is a lantern, but it don't always light the way you want. She wasn't wrong. I called a friend Jake, who's a bit of a tech nerd. He came over, took one look at the photos and said, "Dude, this is some stalker level gear. High-res sneaky angles, someone's got skills." We checked the house for cameras, but found nothing. Just more questions. Jake suggested setting up my own camera to catch whoever it was. So we did a cheap webcam aimed at the basement door. That night I barely slept, eyes glued to my laptop screen. Around 2 a.m., the feed glitched static, then black. When it came back, the door was slightly ajar. I grabbed the bat, heart pounding, but the basement was empty. The footage showed nothing. No one entered, no one left. Just the door moving on its own. The next day, I noticed something else. A faint scratch on the basement wall, like someone had carved a tally mark. It wasn't there before. I started checking the walls daily, and sure enough, another mark appeared 2 days later. Someone or something was keeping count. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was just stress. Ever try to convince yourself your house isn't haunted, but then your toaster pops up at 3 a.m. for no reason? Yeah, me too. There's a debate among psychologists about whether fear can make you see patterns where none exist. Pareidolia, they call it. But those tally marks weren't my imagination. I kept going back to the hidden room like it was pulling me. One night, I found a new photo on the table, still damp from developing. It was me standing in the basement, holding the metal box. Taken 2 days ago. My breath caught someone had been there right behind me, and I hadn't heard a thing. I boarded up the door, nailing it shut. But the house didn't feel any safer. It was like the walls themselves were watching, waiting for my next move. The boarded up door didn't stop the house from feeling like it had eyes. I barely slept, jumping at every creak, the baseball bat now a permanent fixture by my side. The police had come and gone, their search turning up nothing but dust and those damn photos. The officer with the retro mustache had shrugged, saying, "Probably some drifter who got spooked and ran." But the house didn't feel empty. It felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to let my guard down. Ever notice how a house can feel like it's judging you, like it's saying, "Nice try, but I'm still in charge"? I tried to go about my days making coffee, working remotely, pretending everything was normal. But normal doesn't include finding your toothbrush in the freezer or your laptop charger coiled neatly on the stairs. Each time I checked the webcam footage, nothing. Just objects moving when I wasn't looking. I started leaving notes for myself like keys in bold 8 p.m. to rule out my own forgetfulness. Didn't help. The notes ended up crumpled in the trash, replaced by new tally marks on the basement wall. 3 now etched like a countdown. Desperate, I called Jake again. He showed up with a 6-pack and a ghost hunting app he swore was legit. We laughed, cracking open beers, but the app's needle spiked in the basement near the boarded door. "Probably just bad wiring," Jake said, but his eyes were wide. We sat there staring at the sealed door, the air heavy with that sour smell. I told him about the tally marks, and he suggested it might be a squatter, someone still slipping in. But how every entry was locked and the boards on the door hadn't budged. I started talking to neighbors, hoping for answers. Most were friendly but clueless, offering vague stories about the house being odd. One guy, Mr. Peterson, an old-timer, with a face like crumpled paper, leaned over his fence and said, "That place don't like letting go of its secrets." He'd lived here 50 years and remembered a fire in the 60s when the house was nearly gutted. No one died officially, but he swore the owner, back then, maybe Elias never left. Some folks, he said, get woven into a house's bones. His words stuck with me, heavy as the air in that hidden room. Ever hear how some cultures believe houses have souls like they're alive, keeping score of everyone who's lived there? I dug into the town library's archives, flipping through dusty records. The fire Mr. Peterson mentioned was real. 1963 cause unknown, no casualties reported. But there were gaps like pages torn out of a book. Elias's name popped up again, listed as the owner from 1958 to 1963. Then nothing. No death certificate, no sale records. It was like he'd dissolved into the walls. There's a debate among paranormal researchers about whether trauma can bind someone to a place, a kind of emotional tether. I wasn't ready to believe in ghosts, but the house was making a strong case. Back home, I found another photo. This time slipped under my bedroom door. It was me standing in the library, holding a book about local history. Taken yesterday, my stomach twisted. I'd been alone, or so I thought. I checked the webcam again, static at 1:47 a.m. Then the door ajar, just like before. I tore the boards off, flashlight shaking, and stormed the hidden room. Nothing. Just the cot, the chair, and that oppressive silence. But on the table, a new tally mark was scratched, not on the wall, on the wood itself. 4 now. I sat there, heart pounding, realizing this wasn't just a squatter. The house or something in it was playing a game, and I was the unwilling pawn. I tried to joke to myself. Maybe it's just the house's way of saying it wants a roommate. But the humor fell flat. I reinstalled the boards, added a padlock, and spent the night on the couch, bat in hand, listening to the house breathe. The padlock on the basement door gave me a sliver of comfort, but it was like putting a band-aid on a broken leg. The house still hummed with that watchful energy, like it was sizing me up. I stopped sleeping in my bedroom, camping out on the couch with the bat nearby, every shadow a potential threat. The tally marks, now 4, felt like a clock, ticking down to something I didn't want to meet. Ever feel like your house is playing chess with you and you're the pawn? This place was 3 moves ahead. I couldn't keep living like this, so I went back to the neighbors, hoping for more than vague rumors. Most waved me off with polite smiles, but one woman, Mrs. Clara, invited me in. She was ancient, her hands gnarled like tree roots, her eyes sharp despite the years. Over tea that smelled like lavender and regret. She told me about her nephew Thomas, who'd lived in my house in the 80s. Quiet boy, she said, but broken. Lost his parents young, got obsessed with that house. Said it spoke to him. She paused, her cup trembling. Thomas disappeared in 89, no trace. Just like Elias, decades before. Clara's voice dropped to a whisper. Some houses don't let go of their people. Her words hit like a punch. Thomas, Elias, were they the unseen tenants or victims of something older? Clara gave me an old photo of Thomas, a lanky kid with haunted eyes standing in front of my house. I recognized the tilt of his head. It matched the shadow I'd seen in the mirror. My stomach churned, but I kept listening. Clara said Thomas used to talk about keeping the house's secrets like it was his job. Ever wonder if houses pick their tenants, not the other way around, like maybe this one chose me for a reason? Back home, I taped Thomas's photo to the fridge, a reminder to stay sharp. The house felt quieter that day, but not peaceful, more like it was sulking. I checked the basement door. The padlock was untouched, but a new tally mark appeared on the frame. 5. I started keeping a journal noting every oddity: a fork in the wrong drawer, a light flickering in a pattern, the faint sound of scratching at night. Writing it down made it feel less like I was losing my mind. But the patterns were undeniable. Something was here, marking time. I went back to the library, digging deeper. Old records mentioned a family who built the house in 1890, the Warrens who lost 3 kids to illness before vanishing themselves. No one knew where they went, but rumors swirled about a pact, a ritual to bind the house to their blood. It sounded like folklore, but the clippings about Elias and Thomas echoed that same eerie thread. There's a debate among folklorists about whether houses can become cursed by grief trapping souls in their walls. I wasn't sure I bought it, but the tally marks were real, and so was the photo of me that appeared on my pillow that night, taken while I was in the library reading about the Warrens. I called Jake again, half hoping he'd laugh it off. He didn't. We set up more cameras, one in every room, but the footage kept glitching at random hours, always around 2 a.m. One clip caught a shadow moving across the hallway, too tall to be mine, too quick to be human. Jake, pale as milk, said, "Dude, this is beyond squatters. You gotta get out." But I couldn't. The house felt like it had hooks in me, like leaving would mean letting it win. Ever try to outstubborn a haunted house? Spoiler, it's got more patience than you. Clara's wisdom lingered. Don't fight a house that's made up its mind. She'd said it with a sad smile, like she'd seen this story play out before. I wasn't ready to give up, but I was starting to wonder if I was fighting Thomas Elias or the house itself. That night I heard it again. The tap, 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 slower now, like a heartbeat winding down. I gripped the bat, staring at the basement door, knowing I'd have to face whatever was counting those marks. The tap, tap, tap echoed in my head like a metronome for the house's unseen pulse. I couldn't shake Clara's words about Thomas or the photo of him staring from my fridge, his eyes like holes burned into the past. The basement door stayed locked, but the tally marks kept coming 6 now, scratched into the frame like a warning. I was done playing defense. Ever feel like you're arguing with the house and losing? Yeah, this place was winning by a landslide. I decided to tear the house apart, metaphorically at least. Armed with a crowbar and a playlist of 80s rock to keep my nerves steady, I started in the basement. The hidden room was still sealed, but I pried up more floorboards around it, looking for anything: wires, trapdoors, some clue to who or what was watching me. Under one board I found a small leather notebook, its pages brittle and yellowed. The handwriting was jagged, like it was written in a hurry or a panic. It was Thomas's journal, dated 1987 to 1989. Each entry was a fever dream of paranoia. The house sees me. It wants me to stay. I hear it in the walls counting. He wrote about finding photos of himself, just like I had, and feeling the house choose him. My skin crawled reading it. His words were practically my own thoughts. One entry stood out. The Warrens built it to hold their grief, but it holds more now. It keeps us. It was like Thomas had been unraveling the same mystery, only he didn't make it out. The last page was a single line. I'm part of it now. I sat there, the notebook heavy in my hands, the basement air pressing in. Ever find a diary that feels like it's reading you back? This one knew my fears before I did. I took the journal upstairs, locking the basement door behind me. The house felt different now, not quieter, but heavier. like it was waiting for me to catch up. I read the journal again, cross-referencing it with library records. Thomas had mentioned the Warrens, so I dug into their story. The family's tragedy in 1890 wasn't just illness. There were whispers of a ritual gone wrong. Something about binding their souls to protect the house from being abandoned. It was folklore, sure, but folklore has a way of growing roots in truth. There's a debate among historians about whether rituals can imprint energy on a place like a psychic scar. Thomas's journal made me think the Warrens' grief had scarred this house deep. I showed the journal to Jake, who'd stopped joking about ghost apps. He read it, his face pale, and said, "This guy was losing it, but maybe he wasn't wrong. What if the house is alive?" We laughed nervously, but the idea stuck. I started noticing patterns in the journal's dates. Thomas's entries spiked around the same times my cameras glitched 2 a.m. I set up a motion sensor in the hallway, hoping to catch something concrete. That night it went off, but the footage was just static. When I checked the basement, another tally mark appeared, 7. I tried to joke. Maybe the house is just keeping score of how many times I freak out. But my voice shook. The next day I found a new photo under the couch, me reading Thomas's journal in the kitchen. Taken last night. My heart raced. I'd been alone, doors locked, cameras on. I tore through the house, checking every corner, but found nothing. Then I noticed the journal was open to a page I hadn't read, one Thomas hadn't written. In fresh ink it said, "You're part of it now." My hands went cold. The house wasn't just watching, it was writing my story too. Clara's warning echoed, "Don't fight a house that's made up its mind." Her nephew had tried, and he was gone. I wasn't ready to give up, but I was starting to feel like Thomas, trapped in a script I didn't write. That night, the tap, tap, tap came again, slow and deliberate, like the house was inviting me to find the next clue. The journal's words, "You're part of it," now clung to me like damp clothes. The house wasn't just watching, it was weaving me into its story, like Thomas, like Elias, like the Warrens. 7 tally marks now, each one a step closer to whatever the house wanted. I couldn't keep running from it, so I decided to lean in, to change the narrative. Ever try to rewrite a story your house is telling? Spoiler, it's got a stubborn editor. I started in the basement, crowbar in hand, not to destroy, but to reclaim. The hidden room felt like the heart of the house's secrets, so I decided to transform it. I hauled out the cot, the chair, the table, and all those eerie photos, stacking them in the garage. The air in the room lightened, like it was exhaling for the first time in years. I painted the walls a soft blue, dragged in a bookshelf, and turned the space into a library. It wasn't much, just some second-hand novels and a lamp, but it felt like a rebellion against the house's grip. Ever notice how a fresh coat of paint can make a room feel like it's forgotten, its ghosts? This one was trying. I kept Thomas's journal on the shelf, not hidden, but honored, like a reminder of who'd been here before. The house stayed quiet for days. No new tally marks, no photos slipping under doors. I thought maybe I'd broken the cycle, but I wasn't naive enough to believe it. Clara's words echoed. Houses don't let go easy. She'd seen it with Thomas, and her warning carried the weight of someone who'd lost too much. I wasn't fighting the house anymore. I was trying to make peace with it. I started spending evenings in the new library, reading by lamplight, the air less heavy, but still watchful. One night, I found a book I hadn't bought, an old history of the town tucked behind the others. Inside was a handwritten note, not in Thomas's jagged scrawl, but in a looping script the house remembers. My pulse quickened, but I didn't panic. I left the note there, a silent acknowledgement, and kept reading. The book mentioned the Warrens again, hinting at their ritual as a desperate act to keep their lost children close. There's a debate among anthropologists about whether rituals can anchor emotions to a place, creating a kind of spiritual echo. This house felt like it was echoing forever. Jake came by impressed with the library, but still uneasy. "You're nuts for staying," he said, eyeing the shelves like they might bite. We laughed, but his voice was tight. I showed him the note, and he shook his head. "This place is messing with you, man." Maybe he was right, but I felt a strange calm, like I was starting to understand the house's language. That night the motion sensor didn't go off, but I heard a faint hum, like the house was humming a lullaby. Ever hear your house sing? Mine's got a creepy tune, but it's kind of catchy. A week later, I found another note in the same looping script tucked in a novel, "You're healing it." I froze. Was the house just rewriting me again? I kept working, adding plants to the library. A rug, a chair that didn't creak, the tally mark stopped at 7, and the tap 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 was gone. But one night, as I read, a shadow passed over the lamp, too slow to be a trick of light. I looked up, heart thumping, but the room was empty. The house wasn't done with me. It was just changing its approach. I thought of Clara's wisdom. A house holds what you give it. She'd said it over tea, her eyes distant, like she was talking to Thomas's ghost. I was giving this house a library, a new story, but I couldn't shake the feeling it was still holding pieces of me, waiting to see what I'd give next. The house's lullaby hum faded, but its presence lingered like a guest who overstays their welcome. No new tally marks appeared, and the tap 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 was gone. But I wasn't fooled. The house was just catching its breath. My new library felt like a small victory, a patch of light in a place heavy with shadows. Yet every time I sat there, reading under the lamp, I felt it watching, not hostile but curious, like it was studying my attempt to rewrite its story. Ever feel like your house is taking notes on you? Mine's got a whole notebook by now. I kept up my routine, adding more books to the shelves, even a small radio for background noise. The house stayed quiet, almost too quiet, like it was waiting for me to slip up. One evening, as I flipped through a novel, a faint breeze brushed my neck, though the windows were shut. I froze, glancing around, but the room was still. Then I noticed the lamp's light flickering, not the bulb dying, but pulsing like a heartbeat. I laughed it off, muttering, "Nice try, house," but my voice was shaky. The flickering stopped, and I swore I heard a sigh, soft as a whisper from the walls. I decided to dig deeper into the town's history, hoping to understand the house's hold. At the library, I found a ledger from 1890 listing the Warrens' possessions when they built the house. Among the usual furniture linens was a curious entry mirror etched with family sigil. I hadn't seen a mirror like that, but it nagged at me. Back home, I checked the hallway mirror, the one where I'd seen that shadow weeks ago. It was old, the frame carved with faint symbols worn, but intricate like a family crest. I traced them with my finger, and the air grew heavy, like the house was leaning in. That night I dreamed of the mirror. In it, I saw Thomas, then Elias, then faces. I didn't know all, staring back, their eyes hollow. I woke up sweating, the radio in the library, playing static despite being off. I unplugged it, but the static lingered in my head like the house was trying to talk. Ever unplug something and it still makes noise? This house doesn't care about your logic. There's a debate among paranormal enthusiasts about whether mirrors can act as portals, trapping or channeling energy. I wasn't sold, but that mirror felt like it was holding more than my reflection. I called Jake, who was now half convinced I was starring in a horror flick. We examined the mirror, finding no hidden compartments, just those strange symbols. He suggested smashing it, but I couldn't. Breaking it felt like breaking a piece of the house's story. Instead, I covered it with a sheet, hoping to quiet whatever it held. The house didn't like that. The next morning, the sheet was folded neatly on the floor, and a new note was taped to the mirror. "It sees you." My heart skipped, but I left the note there, a silent truce. Days passed without incident, but I started noticing small things. Books in the library rearranged not by title, but by color, forming a gradient I hadn't planned. The radio turned on, once playing a soft jazz tune from decades ago, then shut off when I touched it. The house wasn't angry. It was playful almost. I thought of Clara's wisdom. Give a house what it needs, and it might give you peace. She'd said it with a knowing nod, like she'd bargained with her own ghosts. I was giving this house a library, a new purpose, but it was giving me signs. It wasn't ready to let go. Last night I sat in the library, the lamp steady, the air calm. Then from the hallway, a single tap. Not the rhythmic tap, 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 but enough to make me grip my chair. The house was reminding me it was still here, still writing my chapter. That single tap from the hallway lingered in my bones, a reminder the house wasn't done telling its story. The library felt like my sanctuary, but even there, the air held a quiet weight, like the house was whispering, "You're not out of this yet." No new tally marks, no photos, but the mirror in the hallway, still covered, seemed to hum with its own pulse. I left the sheet on, half expecting it to slide off again, but it stayed put. Ever feel like your house is giving you the silent treatment? Mine's mastered the art. I needed answers, not just guesses, so I dove back into the town's records. The library's archive room smelled like dust and forgotten promises, but it held secrets. I found a file on the Warrens tucked away in a box labeled unresolved. It wasn't just their kids' deaths in 1890 that broke them. It was what came after. A local paper from 1891 hinted at a scandal, a ritual in the house led by the Warrens' matriarch to keep the family eternal. Neighbors reported strange lights, chants, and then silence. The Warrens vanished soon after leaving the house empty until Elias bought it in 1958. The file mentioned that etched mirror said to be a conduit for their ritual. My stomach twisted. Had I been staring into their anchor all this time? I cross-referenced names from Thomas's journal. One entry mentioned a Mr. E, likely Elias, who'd written about guarding the house's heart. It was vague, but it connected to Clara's story about Thomas's obsession. I found a 1963 fire report noting Elias's disappearance after the blaze. No body, no trace, just like Thomas in '89. The pattern was clear. The house claimed its tenants one way or another. Ever wonder if a house keeps a guest book of souls? This one's pages are full. Back home, I uncovered the mirror, half expecting a ghost to jump out. Nothing happened, but the symbols on the frame seemed sharper, almost glowing under the hallway light. I traced them again, and the air thickened like the house was holding its breath. That night I heard the hum again, not from the radio but from the walls, low and steady like a heartbeat. I didn't sleep, just sat in the library, staring at the mirror's reflection through the doorway. It showed only me, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Something else was looking back. I visited Clara again, bringing the journal and the mirror's description. Her eyes clouded when I mentioned the symbols. My Thomas drew those once, she said, her voice brittle. Said they were the house's language. She didn't know more, but warned me again. Don't let it write you out. Her words carried the weight of someone who'd seen the house win before. There's a debate among folklorists about whether symbols can hold power, binding intent to objects. Those carvings felt alive, like they were watching me as much as the house was. The next day I found a new note in the library, tucked inside the town history book. It knows your name. My pulse raced, but I didn't run. Instead, I spoke to the house, feeling ridiculous but desperate. What do you want? I asked, my voice echoing in the empty room. No answer, but the hum stopped, and the mirror's reflection flickered just for a second. I laughed nervously. Talking to a house next, I'll be inviting it for coffee. But the silence felt different, like the house was listening. I kept adding to the library more books, a small desk, trying to make it mine. The house didn't fight back, but it didn't surrender either. Last night, as I read, the radio clicked on, playing that same old jazz tune. I didn't touch it this time, just let it play, feeling the house settle around me like it was saying, we're not done, but we're talking. The house and I were in a strange dance now, not fighting, but circling each other, like partners testing trust. The radio's jazz tune lingered in my head, a reminder that the house was talking even if I didn't fully understand its language. No new notes, no tally marks, just a quiet that felt more like a truce than a surrender. The mirror stayed covered, its symbols hidden, but I could feel its pull like a heartbeat I couldn't ignore. Ever feel like your house is sizing you up for a role you didn't audition for? Mine's got me cast as the lead. I decided to stay, not out of stubbornness, but because leaving felt like abandoning a story half told. The library was my anchor, its shelves heavy with books and the weight of Thomas's journal. I started writing in it, adding my own entries. Not paranoia, but observations. The way the lamp flickered when I mentioned the Warrens, how the air warmed when I read aloud. The house seemed to listen, its hum softer, almost approving. I wasn't just living here. I was becoming its keeper, guarding its stories like Elias and Thomas before me. One afternoon, I found a new book on the shelf, one I hadn't placed, an old ledger, its pages brittle, listing names and dates from the 1890s. It wasn't the Warrens, but their neighbors, noting visits to the house before it went silent. One entry stood out. Mrs. Warren spoke of a guardian, someone to carry the house's memory. My breath caught. Was that what I was becoming? There's a debate among cultural historians about whether places can assign roles to people, turning them into unwitting stewards of history. This house was making a strong case I was its next in line. I visited Clara one last time, showing her the ledger. Her hands shook as she read it, her eyes distant. Thomas felt it too, she whispered. He said the house chose him to stay. She didn't warn me this time, just looked at me with quiet resignation, like she knew I'd already decided. Her wisdom stuck. A house keeps what it loves. I wasn't sure if the house loved me or just needed me, but I felt bound to it like a thread in its endless tapestry. Back home, I uncovered the mirror ready to face whatever it held. The symbols didn't glow, but the air shifted like the house was exhaling. I spoke to it again softly. I'm here. I'll keep your stories. The hum returned gentle like a nod. That night the radio played without static a slow melody from another era. I didn't turn it off. Just let it fill the library, feeling the house settle around me. Ever dance with the house? It's got better rhythm than you'd think. The next day, I found a new note in the ledger, in that looping script. You're enough, my heart steadied. The house wasn't letting go, but it wasn't trapping me either. It was sharing itself. I kept writing in the journal, adding my story to Thomas's, to Elias's, to the Warrens. The library grew more books, more life, and the house felt less heavy, like it was breathing easier. I wasn't just a tenant. I was part of its legacy, a guardian of its haunted history. Last night I sat in the library. The lamp warmed the mirror, reflecting only me. A single tap came from the hallway, soft, almost friendly, like the house saying, "We're in this together now." I smiled, not afraid, ready to carry its stories forward. The house and I had settled into an uneasy partnership, like roommates who'd learned to tolerate each other's quirks. The single tap from the hallway hadn't returned, and the mirror stayed quiet, its symbols no longer seeming to pulse. The library felt alive, its shelves brimming with stories, mine included, woven into the house's strange tapestry. Yet I knew the house wasn't done. It was too old, too heavy with memory to ever truly rest. Ever feel like your house is your co-author, scribbling notes in the margins of your life? Mine's got a pen that never runs dry. I kept writing in Thomas's journal, not just to record, but to speak to the house, to show it I was listening. My entries were simple, the way the floorboards creaked in a rhythm when I walked, how the lamp glowed brighter when I read about the Warrens. The house responded in small ways, a breeze through a closed window, a book falling open to a page about local rituals. It wasn't threatening anymore. It was sharing, like it trusted me to carry its weight. There's a debate among spiritualists about whether houses can form bonds with people, not just haunting them, but coexisting. I was starting to believe it, feeling less like a tenant and more like a partner. One morning, I found a new entry in the journal, not in my handwriting or Thomas's jagged scroll, but in that looping script. You see me now. My heart skipped, not from fear, but recognition. The house wasn't hiding anymore. It was revealing itself piece by piece. I started talking to it more, not just in moments of frustration, but casually, like you chat with a friend. Nice day, huh? I'd say half laughing, and the hum would answer soft and warm. Ever talk to your house like it's an old pal? Mine's got stories for days. I decided to research the mirror's symbols, sketching them and taking them to the library. An archivist, a wiry woman with glasses perched on her nose, recognized them as an old family sigil, not just the Warrens, but tied to a local tradition of binding spirits to places. It's not a curse, she said, but a promise to protect what's loved. That stuck with me. Maybe the Warrens, Elias, Thomas, and now me were all part of that promise, not trapped, but chosen to keep the house's memory alive. I thanked her, leaving with a sense of purpose, like I was carrying a torch passed down through time. Back home, I hung a small photo of Clara next to Thomas's on the fridge, honoring the connection. The house felt lighter, the air less thick, like it approved. I kept building the library, adding a cozy armchair, a few candles for warmth. One night, as I read, the mirror reflected a flicker, not a shadow, but a soft glow like candlelight from another room. I didn't flinch, just nodded, feeling the house's presence settle beside me. The radio played that jazz tune again, unprompted, and I let it play the melody, weaving through the room like a shared memory. Clara's words rang true. A house keeps what it loves. I was part of that now, not just a name in the journal, but a voice in the house's endless story. Last night I sat in the library, the lamp casting a steady glow, the mirror reflecting a room full of life. A faint hum rose not from the walls, but from within me like the house, and I were finally in tune. No taps, no notes, just a quiet understanding that I was home, not just in the house, but in its history, its heart. In a chilling tale of a haunted house, the narrator moves into an old Victorian home only to uncover its unsettling secrets. Initially dismissing oddities like misplaced objects and strange noises, they soon discover eerie photos of themselves and tally marks scratched into the basement walls, suggesting an unseen presence. The boarded-up door in the basement, a hidden room, and a journal from a previous tenant, Thomas, reveal a pattern of disappearances tied to the house's history. Starting with the Warren family in the 1890s, their tragic loss of 3 children led to a ritual to bind their souls to the house, creating a lingering spiritual echo. As the narrator digs deeper, finding clues in town archives, and through Clara Thomas's aunt, they realize the house is alive, choosing its tenants as guardians of its memories. The narrator transforms the basement into a library, attempting to rewrite the house's story, but it responds with notes in looping script like, "You are enough," suggesting a growing bond. The mirror etched with the Warren sigil acts as a conduit reflecting shadows of past tenants. By part 10, the narrator accepts their role as the house's keeper, coexisting with its presence marked by a final tap and a hum that feels like harmony. The story explores themes of grief, memory, and coexistence, leaving the narrator not trapped but entwined with the house's legacy, a steward of its haunted history.